She pretended to be human for 8 years, until the Lycan king scented her in. She wore the mask of a human, pretending to be one of them, when in truth she was something much more. Her eyes, like moonlit lakes, shone with an ancient power, and her presence always seemed to stir the air around her. But no one ever asked questions. No one ever suspected. She had chosen this quiet life after leaving behind the world of Lycans, the brutal, powerful creatures she was born to. Her mother, once the queen of the Lycan kingdom, had escaped with Leora after a great betrayal that shattered their family. Leora had been only a child then, too young to understand the full weight of what had happened. But as she grew older, the shadows of that past began to weigh on her. She was the last of her bloodline, the last of the royal family, but she carried with her a curse that made her both dangerous and desirable. And so, she lived quietly in the village, avoiding attention, keeping her secret close. But everything changed the day he arrived. The Lycan king, Kaelin, was a legend in the lands. His name was spoken with both fear and respect. He was the ruler of all Lycans, a king whose power was matched only by his cruelty. He had inherited a kingdom built on the strength of his pack, and his reputation for hunting down traitors was well known. But it was not his reputation that brought him to the village. It was the scent. Kaelin had spent years searching for something, a trace. A scent so faint that it was almost impossible to follow. It had haunted him for years, slipping through his fingers like smoke. But today, as he stood in the village square, he felt it again, the familiar, intoxicating scent. It was unlike anything else, and it was close. Leora was unaware that the man who had once been a part of her mother's past had just arrived in her quiet world. She was at the market, exchanging herbs with an old woman, when she first caught sight of him. His presence was impossible to ignore. There was a power about him, a danger that made the air itself hum with tension. His eyes, sharp and dark, swept over the crowd, and in that moment their gazes met. It was not just a glance. It was as if time stopped. Leora's heart skipped a beat. She felt it, the pull, the recognition that ran deeper than anything she could explain. He was different. He was not human. Kaelin, on the other hand, felt the pull of her scent the moment he set foot in the village. It was faint at first, a trace of something familiar, something long lost. His wolf instincts, always sharp and alert, had picked it up immediately. The bloodline he had been searching for, the lost queen's daughter, was here. And this girl standing in the market was no ordinary woman. She was something else. He had not expected to find her so soon. His heart, hardened by years of conflict and pain, skipped a beat. There was no doubt now. This girl, with her strange, unsettling beauty, was connected to the bloodline he had spent years trying to track down. But the question remained, why had she hidden herself? Why was she pretending to be human? Leora quickly looked away, her pulse racing. She could feel his gaze on her, like an invisible thread pulling her closer. She knew, without a doubt, that he was no ordinary man. His aura alone told her that. But what truly unsettled her was the recognition in his eyes. It was as if he knew her, or at least, knew what she was. Kaelin's eyes never left her as she moved through the crowd, trying to act normal, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in her chest. Her mind was already racing with thoughts of escape. She couldn't afford to let anyone know. Not now, not when she had built a life for herself in the village. Not when the past she had run from for so long was now standing before her, threatening to tear it all apart. But Kaelin wasn't about to let her slip away so easily. He moved through the market with purpose, his eyes locked on her every step. The villagers, busy with their daily tasks, didn't seem to notice the tension building in the air, but Leora could feel it. She could feel his presence growing closer, the space between them shrinking with each passing second. Finally, he reached her. Leora turned to find him standing right before her, his dark eyes intense, almost as if he could see straight through her. She instinctively took a small step back, but his gaze never wavered. The air around them crackled with an energy that made her heart race even faster. She knew this moment was inevitable, but she couldn't help but wonder if she was ready for it. Kalen spoke first, his voice low and commanding, as if he was used to having his questions answered without hesitation. "You're not human," he said simply, his words cutting through the quiet hum of the market. Leora's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected him to confront her so directly, but then again, she had always known this day would come. She was too different. She wasn't like the others. She was the last of the royal Lycan bloodline, the daughter of a queen who had betrayed everything to protect her. But how could she explain that to him? How could she tell him that she had spent 8 years hiding her true nature, pretending to be someone she was not? "I don't know what you mean," Leora said, forcing her voice to remain steady, though her heart hammered in her chest. Kalen's lips curled into a knowing smile, though it held no warmth. "Don't lie to me," he said, stepping closer. His presence seemed to surround her, filling the air with a tension that was impossible to ignore. "I can smell it on you, the blood of the old kingdom. The scent of your mother." Leora's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know how he could know this, but somehow she wasn't surprised. Kalen had an uncanny ability to track what he wanted, and in this moment she was his prey. But the truth, the real truth, was that she wasn't ready to confront him. She wasn't ready to face the past that had haunted her for so long. She wasn't ready to be caught in the web of fate that had brought her here. "I'm not who you think I am," Leora said quietly, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain calm. Kalen's eyes narrowed, and for a moment the air seemed to grow colder. "We'll see about that," he replied, his tone colder than before. Leora felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't hide from him anymore. The moment they had met, the game had changed. She was no longer just a simple girl in a quiet village. And Kalen, the Lycan king, was not going to let her slip away so easily. The air between Leora and Kalen was thick with unspoken tension. She could feel his eyes on her, as though he could see straight through the carefully constructed layers of lies she had built over the past 8 years. Every instinct in her screamed to flee, to escape before he could pry any deeper into her secrets. But her feet felt rooted to the ground. She couldn't move. She couldn't run. Kalen's gaze never left her. There was no mistaking it now. He knew what she was. And despite her attempts to stay calm, the unease that had been building in her chest finally broke free, filling the space between them. "I don't know what you think you smell, but you're wrong," Leora managed to say, her voice trembling despite the words she tried to push out. She stepped back, hoping the distance between them might shield her from whatever power he had over her. Kalen stepped forward, not threateningly, but with a certainty that made Leora's heart beat faster. "I don't need to smell anything else, Leora. I know your bloodline. I know your scent," he said softly, his voice low and smooth like a whisper of wind through the trees. "And I know it's been hidden for far too long." Leora felt the sting of his words like a slap. The weight of everything she had worked to conceal for so long was suddenly exposed. She had spent years running, building a life far from the dangers of her past, only to have it all unravel in a single moment. "You don't know me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. "I'm not who you think I am." Kalen didn't seem to be listening. His sharp, dark eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and seen. "I know more than you think," he replied, his gaze softening just for a moment. "I've been searching for you for years, for the last of the royal bloodline." Leora's heart skipped a beat. His words echoed in her mind, but the truth of what he said felt distant. She had always known that her past would catch up with her someday. But this was more than she had expected. The Lycan king himself, standing before her, hunting for the bloodline she had hoped to forget. "You're not just a girl from this village," Kalen continued, stepping even closer. "You're the daughter of the queen who ran, the one who abandoned us all." Leora flinched at his words. The pain in his voice wasn't lost on her. She knew what he meant. Her mother, once a beloved queen, had fled the Lycan kingdom years ago, taking Leora with her. They had escaped the madness of the court, the betrayal, the curse. Leora had grown up in hiding, believing that she could live a quiet life. But Kaelin's words, his certainty, shattered that illusion. "My mother didn't abandon anyone," Leora said, her voice sharper now. "She protected me. She kept me safe from the world you live in, from the world you rule." Kaelin paused, as if her words had struck him in some way. He stared at her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched on for a long moment before he spoke again, his voice more forceful but still tinged with something softer beneath the surface. "Your mother didn't just run, Leora. She betrayed everything she once stood for. She left the kingdom to fall into ruin," Kaelin said, his eyes never leaving hers. "And I had to pick up the pieces." Leora didn't know what to say. She had never fully understood the weight of her mother's decision to leave the kingdom. But hearing it from Kaelin, hearing the anger and regret in his voice, made her wonder if her mother's actions had caused more harm than she had realized. Kaelin's gaze softened again, and for a moment Leora thought she saw something different in his eyes, something almost like sadness. But it was gone too quickly for her to be sure. He cleared his throat, stepping back, and the distance between them seemed to grow. "Listen, Leora," he said, his voice much quieter now. "I didn't come here to hurt you, but I've spent years searching for you, and now that I've found you, I need answers. You're the key to something far bigger than both of us. You have a power inside you. Your bloodline carries the magic of the old kingdom. The curse that binds the Lycans to their rage, it can only be broken by you." Leora felt a wave of confusion wash over her. The curse, the magic. She had heard stories of it, of course. Every Lycan knew of the curse that plagued their people, binding them to their savage instincts, preventing them from ever fully controlling their wolf forms. It was a curse that had tormented her mother's kingdom, a curse that had been passed down through generations. But Leora had never been taught how to control it. She had never been trained in the ways of the old kingdom. "I don't know anything about this," she said, her voice trembling again, but this time with a fear she couldn't hide. "I don't even want to know. I've spent years pretending to be human. I don't want any part of this." Kaelin's expression hardened, his jaw tightening as he took a step closer. "You don't have a choice, Leora," he said, his tone firm. "You may have run from your past, but your past hasn't forgotten you. And neither have I." Leora swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, to push him away, to deny everything he was saying. But deep down, she knew he was right. There was no running from her heritage. There was no hiding from what she was. The question was no longer whether she could escape her past, but what she would do with it now that it had found her. Before she could speak, the sound of hooves pounding against the earth reached her ears. Leora's heart skipped a beat as the noise grew louder, coming closer with alarming speed. Kaelin's eyes flicked toward the sound, his body tensing as he instinctively reached for the sword at his side. "We're not alone," he said, his voice low. Leora's breath hitched in her chest. She knew that voice, that unmistakable sound, and in the distance she could see a cloud of dust rising on the horizon, marking the arrival of a group of riders. They were Lycans, her father's pack, and they were coming for her. "No," Leora whispered, fear rising in her throat. "They can't be here, not now." Kaelin's gaze was unrelenting. "They know you're here, Leora. They've been searching for you too." Leora took a step back, panic creeping into her chest. She had never wanted to face her father's pack, never wanted to confront the people who had once ruled over her life. The thought of returning to that world, to the kingdom of Lycan she had escaped, terrified her more than anything. "I can't go with them," she whispered, almost pleading. "I can't go back to that life." Kaelin's expression softened for a brief moment. "You don't have a choice," he said again, his voice low but filled with an unspoken promise. "But you don't have to face them alone." The sound of hooves grew louder and Leora felt her heart race. She knew that the moment they arrived, everything would change. There would be no more hiding, no more pretending. Her past would catch up to her and Kaelin would be a part of it, whether she was ready for it or not. As the riders approached, Kaelin placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. For a moment, the warmth of his touch was the only thing that grounded her in that moment. The rest of the world seemed to fade away. And then, as the first of the riders appeared on the horizon, Kaelin looked at her one last time. "Stay close to me," he whispered. "We'll face this together." But even as he said it, Leora knew that the battle ahead was far from over, and that the choice she had made, to hide, to live as a human, had just come to an end. The riders appeared from the forest, their horses kicking up dust in the fading light. Leora's heart raced as she recognized the markings on their cloaks, the dark insignia of her father's pack. The same pack that had once ruled over the Lycan kingdom before everything had fallen apart. The same pack that had once been her family until her mother had taken her away. Leora's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run, to disappear into the trees and escape their gaze, but she couldn't. Not now. Not when Kaelin was standing next to her, his presence a silent reminder of everything she had been trying to hide. Kaelin stood tall beside her, his body tense and alert. His eyes were fixed on the approaching riders, a hard determination in them that Leora couldn't ignore. He had been waiting for this moment, and now that it had come, there was no turning back. Leora could feel the pull of the past, of the kingdom she had left behind. Her father's pack was here to take her back, to bring her back into a world she had fought so hard to escape. But what did they want with her now? What was it that had drawn them here, to this quiet village at this moment? The leader of the riders, a tall Lycan with silver hair and cold, pale eyes, led the group forward. Leora recognized him instantly. He was her father's most trusted lieutenant, a man who had been by her father's side for years. His name was Darius, and his loyalty to the Old Kingdom ran deep. "Leora," Darius called out, his voice carrying across the clearing. "Come with us. Your father commands it." Leora's heart sank. She had hoped, no, prayed, that they would leave her be. But now, standing in front of her, they were asking for more than just a return. They were demanding her obedience, and she couldn't give it, not without a fight. "I'm not going back with you," Leora said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. She stepped forward, her body instinctively placing itself between Kaelin and the approaching pack. "Tell my father that I've made my choice. I'm staying here." Darius's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a faint sneer. "Your choice? You think you can choose, Leora? You are the last of the royal bloodline. You cannot hide from your destiny." Kaelin's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "She doesn't have to go anywhere with you, not anymore." His words were firm, strong, almost like a warning. Leora glanced at him, feeling the weight of his presence beside her. His hand rested lightly on the hilt of his sword, and for a moment, Leora felt an unfamiliar surge of strength flow through her. She wasn't alone. Darius's gaze flicked from Kaelin to Leora, his expression unreadable. "You think you can protect her?" he asked, his tone almost mocking. "She is of the Old Kingdom. The curse runs through her veins. You cannot keep her from what she is." Kaelin's jaw tightened and he stepped forward, his presence imposing. "I don't care what blood runs through her veins. Leora is under my protection now, and if you want her, you'll have to go through me." The tension in the air grew thick, heavy. Leora could feel the weight of their gazes on her, the past and present colliding with every heartbeat. Her father's lieutenant, the pack of Lycans, and Kaelin, the Lycan king, all standing on the edge of a decision that would change everything. "I've made my choice," Leora repeated, her voice growing firmer even as fear still tightened in her chest. "I'm not going back, not to the curse, not to the kingdom." Darius looked at her for a long moment, his eyes hardening with anger. Then with a sharp motion he turned to his riders. "We don't have time for this," he said, his voice a low growl. "Get her. Bring her back to the kingdom whether she wants to come or not." In an instant the riders spurred their horses forward, the sound of hooves echoing through the clearing. But Kaelin was faster. Before any of them could reach her, he was already moving, drawing his sword with a fluid, practiced motion. His eyes blazed with fury, and Leora could see the power in him, raw, untamed, like the storm that had been brewing just beneath the surface. "Stay back," Kalen shouted to Leora, his voice commanding. He swung his sword in a wide arc, sending one of the riders stumbling back. The force of his strike was enough to send a clear message. This fight wasn't going to be easy. Leora hesitated for only a moment before following his command. She stepped back, her breath coming in sharp, quick gasps as the Lycans advanced. Her mind raced, but there was no time to think. She had to move, had to do something. But what? What could she do against them? She could feel the magic stirring inside her, the ancient power that ran through her bloodline, the magic she had always kept buried. It had been so long since she had used it, since she had even dared to think about it. But now, with the Lycans closing in, with Kalen standing there fighting for her, something shifted inside her. Leora lifted her hands, closing her eyes for a brief moment. She could feel the earth beneath her, the trees around her, the pulse of life in the world around her. She could feel the power stirring inside her, awakening like an ancient beast. And for the first time in years, she let it flow. A surge of energy erupted from her hands, crackling through the air like lightning. The ground beneath the rider's feet seemed to tremble, and the trees around them groaned with an unnatural force. The Lycans faltered for a moment, their horses rearing back in surprise. Leora could feel their fear, their hesitation. Kalen, seeing the effect her power had, turned toward her with a mixture of awe and caution. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly, though his voice was still filled with authority. "I won't go back," Leora said, her voice trembling but fierce. "I won't let them take me." The fight raged on, with Kalen holding off the riders with his sword, but the power in Leora's blood was growing stronger, and she knew she could use it. She could protect herself. She could protect them both. But Darius wasn't done yet. He called out to the remaining riders, his voice cold and commanding. "Get her. She's just a girl. She can't do this alone." Leora's eyes narrowed as she felt the pull of her bloodline, the curse that had been placed upon her family long ago. She knew what it meant. She knew what it would cost, but she didn't care anymore. The fear of her past, of the curse, had been holding her back. Now she would take control. The ground beneath her feet trembled once more, and this time the earth itself seemed to answer her call. The trees around them began to move, their branches twisting and groaning as though alive. The air was filled with the crackling energy of magic, a power that was ancient, wild, and untamed. Darius and his riders were forced to retreat as the forest around them seemed to come to life, pushing back against the advancing Lycans. They had never seen anything like this. They had never felt power like this. Kalen watched in silent awe as the forest seemed to bend to Leora's will, the earth itself rising up to protect her. It was clear now, she wasn't just the last of the royal bloodline. She was the key to something far more powerful. Leora stood tall, her eyes glowing with an inner light. "I won't be your pawn," she said, her voice steady and full of authority. "I won't be your sacrifice. You'll have to kill me to take me back." Darius stared at her, his face hardening with a mixture of rage and fear. But there was nothing more to say. Leora had made her choice, and now the world would have to bend to it. Kalen turned to her, his eyes softening. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "But if this is the path you choose, I'll stand with you." Leora nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The battle was far from over, but for the first time she felt like she was in control. She wasn't running anymore. She was fighting for her future, and for the future she would choose, not the one her past had laid out for her. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its pale light over the forest. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind of silence that comes just before the storm. Leora stood at the edge of the clearing, her hands still glowing faintly from the magic she had unleashed. Her heart raced, each beat a reminder of how far she had come, and how much was still at stake. Around her, the trees seemed to watch, their branches moving with a life of their own, responding to the power within her. The Lycans from her father's pack had been pushed back for now, but they were not defeated, and Leora knew that time was running out. Kalen stood beside her, his gaze trained on the horizon where Darius and the other riders had retreated. He, too, seemed to feel the weight of what was coming. He had protected her, fought for her, but even he could not fight against the inevitable. Her past had come for her, and there was no escaping it now. "You've done well," Kalen said softly, his voice a low rumble. His eyes lingered on her, filled with both admiration and something deeper, something she couldn't name. "But this isn't over. Darius will return, and when he does, he'll bring the full force of the pack with him." Leora nodded, her throat tight. She had always known this moment would come. The question had never been whether her father's pack would find her, but how she would face them, how she would face the curse that had haunted her bloodline for generations. "I know," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear that still clawed at her insides. "But I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding." Kalen's gaze softened. There was something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before, a kind of understanding, like he saw her for who she truly was, not just the girl she had pretended to be. "You're not alone in this, Leora. I'm here, and I will help you fight." Her heart skipped a beat. The words, so simple, yet so powerful, settled into her chest like a warm flame. In that moment, surrounded by the shadows of the past and the weight of destiny, Leora realized that she had never truly been alone. Kalen was with her, by her side, fighting for the same future. But the future wasn't something she could take for granted. The curse, the prophecy, all of it was still hanging over them. And the choice she had to make, whether to embrace her bloodline or reject it, was not a decision she could make lightly. "We need to prepare," Leora said, her voice firm now. "I won't let them take me back, not to the kingdom, not to the curse. I won't let them destroy everything we've built." Kalen nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "Then we fight together." As the night stretched on, the two of them worked in silence, preparing for the battle that was sure to come. Kalen, the Lycan king, was a force to be reckoned with. His sword gleamed in the moonlight, and his presence alone was enough to inspire a kind of quiet fear in the few remaining riders who dared to approach. But Leora knew it would take more than steel to win this battle. It would take everything she had, her magic, her heart, her will. The sound of hooves echoed through the trees again, but this time there was no hesitation. The pack was returning, and with them, the storm. Leora's chest tightened as she felt the ground beneath her feet tremble. The energy in the air was palpable, like the very earth was holding its breath. She turned to Kalen, her eyes meeting his, and in that moment she knew what she had to do. "This is it," she said, her voice steady, though her heart felt as if it might explode in her chest. "No more hiding, no more pretending." Kalen's gaze softened, and for a moment the world around them seemed to disappear. There was no kingdom, no curse, no Lycans. Just the two of them standing in the heart of the forest, knowing that the next few moments would change everything. "I'm with you," he said, his voice low and fierce. "Always." Leora nodded, then turned toward the riders who were now emerging from the forest, their faces shadowed by the moonlight. Darius led the charge, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and determination. "Leora!" Darius shouted as he dismounted, his voice carrying over the clearing. "You cannot escape your bloodline. You are the last of the royal family. The curse is yours to bear, whether you want it or not. You cannot outrun your destiny." Leora's heart clenched, but she stood tall, her chin raised in defiance. "I am not my bloodline," she called back, her voice clear and unwavering. "I am not your pawn. I choose my own path, and I will not return to the kingdom." Darius's eyes flicked to Kalen, and his lips curled into a sneer. "So this is what you've become, Leora. A traitor hiding behind the Lycan king. You'll be his downfall, just like your mother was." Kalen's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword, but Leora stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "No," she said quietly. "This is my fight." Darius's expression darkened as he looked back at Leora. "Then you will fall just as your mother did." With a flick of his wrist, the riders drew their weapons. The air was thick with the scent of danger as the battle lines were drawn. Leora could feel the power within her stir again, and this time she embraced it fully. The ancient magic that had lain dormant in her veins for so long began to rise, filling her with strength and purpose. The ground beneath them rumbled as Leora's power surged, her hands glowing with the energy of her bloodline. The trees around them seemed to bend toward her, the air charged with magic. The Lycans faltered, unsure of what was happening, but Darius's expression remained unchanged. He had seen her power before, but this time it was different. Leora raised her hands and the earth responded. The ground cracked, sending roots and vines spiraling up around the riders, trapping them in place. The Lycans struggled, their strength no match for the force of nature itself. Kalen stepped forward, his sword drawn and ready. "Stay back," he said, his voice low. "This is Leora's battle. Let her finish it." Leora's gaze never wavered from Darius. "This isn't just about power," she said, her voice steady and calm. "It's about choice. I choose who I am, and I choose to live." With a final gesture, she called upon the magic within her and the ground erupted. A wave of energy shot out from her hands, sending the Lycans stumbling back. Darius was the last to remain standing, his eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and fury. "You cannot escape the curse," he spat, his voice filled with venom. "You will always be bound by it." Leora's eyes met his, and in that moment she understood. The curse was not something that could be undone by magic or force. It was something that lived within her, something that had been passed down through generations. But it was not who she was. She was not a curse. She was a choice. "I am not the curse," she said softly, her voice filled with finality, "and I will not be its prisoner." Darius's eyes flickered with something close to regret, but he said nothing more. With a sharp motion, he turned and gestured for his riders to retreat. The pack, seeing their leader's defeat, followed without question. Leora watched as they disappeared into the forest, the battle won but the war far from over. Her chest rose and fell with each breath, and though she had won this fight, she knew the path ahead would not be easy. Kalen stepped beside her, his gaze softening. "You did it," he said, his voice full of admiration. "You've chosen your own path." Leora nodded, though the weight of her choice still pressed heavily on her. "I chose who I am, and I chose you." Kalen smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up his face. "And I will stand by you, Leora, no matter what comes next." The moon shone brightly above them, casting its light over the forest, and for the first time Leora felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, no longer running, no longer hiding, but standing strong, ready to face whatever came next. Together,